They called him the dumbest man in America. Not behind his back, not quietly. They said it openly, confidently, and often. And the strange part is, they weren't entirely wrong. Timothy Dexter could barely read. He could barely write. His spelling looked like a keyboard had been dropped down a flight of stairs. He misunderstood conversations, misread social cues, and routinely made decisions that should have destroyed him financially, socially, and historically. And yet, against all logic, all probability, and all common sense, Timothy Dexter became one of the wealthiest men in the early United States. This is not a story about intelligence. This is a story about chaos, and how one man somehow rode it like a wave straight into fortune. To understand why Timothy Dexter is so bizarre, you have to understand the world he lived in. 18th century America was not forgiving. There were no safety nets, no second chances, no viral redemption arcs. If you failed publicly, you failed permanently. Reputation mattered, education mattered, connections mattered, and Timothy Dexter had none of those. What he did have was an unshakable belief that he was always right, even when everyone else was laughing. Timothy Dexter was born in 1747 in colonial Massachusetts. Poor family, minimal education, the kind of upbringing where expectations are kept low, so disappointment doesn't have to travel very far. From an early age, Timothy was considered slow, not quiet slow, loud slow. The kind of slow that confidently says the wrong thing at exactly the wrong time. People didn't correct him because they didn't think it would help. They didn't mentor him because they didn't think it would matter. Timothy Dexter was written off before he ever had a chance to write himself in. But then something happened that would change everything. Timothy married a wealthy widow. And suddenly, the man everyone had dismissed now had money. Not genius money, not empire money, but enough money to make people pay attention, and enough money to make people want to take advantage of him. When Timothy moved to Newburyport, Massachusetts, a bustling port town full of merchants and traders, he became entertainment. The local elites didn't see him as competition. They saw him as a walking cautionary tale, a rich fool, someone who could be nudged into disastrous decisions for their amusement. So they began giving him advice, terrible advice. One merchant suggested Timothy invest in bed warmers and ship them to the Caribbean. Bed warmers were metal pans filled with hot coals, used to heat beds in cold climates. The Caribbean, of course, had no such need. It was the kind of suggestion that only existed to humiliate someone afterward. Timothy listened. He nodded. He invested heavily, and he shipped them. The merchants laughed. They imagined crates of useless metal rusting in tropical ports. They imagined Timothy's embarrassment when he realized he'd been played. They imagined the story they'd tell for years. But when the shipment arrived, plantation owners bought every single bed warmer. Not for beds, but for cooling sugar syrup during processing. The shipment sold out. Timothy Dexter made a profit. The laughter stopped. Briefly. Everyone told themselves it was luck, a fluke, a statistical error. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. So they tried again. Someone told Timothy to ship coal to Newcastle, England. Newcastle was famous for coal. Sending coal there was such a stupid idea that it was already a proverb. Carrying coals to Newcastle meant doing something pointless. Timothy invested. He shipped coal. And again, reality betrayed logic. A miners' strike had shut down local supply. Coal prices skyrocketed. Timothy's shipment arrived at exactly the right moment. He sold every bit of it at a premium. Another fortune. Now people were uncomfortable. They tried again. This time, they suggested exporting wool mittens to the West Indies. Thick mittens. In tropical heat. Timothy sent them. Sailors bought them to protect their hands from rope burns and sun exposure. Another success. By this point, the joke wasn't funny anymore. The man they were trying to humiliate kept winning. And the worst part? Timothy didn't even realize why it was funny in the first place. He didn't know he was supposed to fail. He didn't know he was being mocked. He just assumed people were giving him good advice. And because he never questioned it, never hesitated, never second-guessed himself, he acted faster than everyone else. While educated men debated outcomes, Timothy shipped cargo. While experts predicted markets, Timothy ignored them. And while clever people waited for certainty, Timothy barreled forward blindly and somehow landed on his feet every time. Soon, Timothy Dexter wasn't just rich. He was visibly rich. He built a massive mansion in Newburyport. Not elegant, not tasteful, massive, loud, impossible to ignore. And then he decorated it with statues, dozens of them, famous figures from history, politics, and mythology. Except, many of them were mislabeled. Statues of philosophers were named as generals. Kings were confused with poets. Some names were misspelled. Others were completely wrong. One statue of a political rival was placed on the far edge of the property, turned away from the house as if it were being punished. Timothy installed a statue of himself too. Naturally, he considered himself equal to history's greatest figures, and in his mind, he had earned it. Neighbors complained. Visitors mocked. Timothy loved it, because attention validated him. Criticism confirmed his importance. The fact that people talked about him at all meant he mattered, and Timothy Dexter wanted to be heard. So he decided to write a book. It was called A Pickle for the Knowing Ones. The book was chaos in printed form. There was almost no punctuation. Words blended together. Thoughts collided. Sentences never ended. Reading it felt like listening to someone talk without ever breathing. Critics had a field day. They tore it apart. They mocked his intelligence. They called it unreadable. Timothy responded by releasing a second edition. In it, he included an entire page of punctuation marks, commas, periods, question marks, exclamation points, and told readers they could put them in wherever you please. He wasn't joking. Timothy Dexter didn't understand why punctuation mattered, but he understood that people complained about its absence. So he compromised. In the most unhinged way possible, the book sold. Not because it was good, but because it was infamous. By now, Timothy Dexter was a walking paradox. A man too ignorant to be cautious, too confident to be embarrassed, too lucky to fail. But his personal life was far less charming. Timothy was notoriously cruel to his wife. He treated her with suspicion, resentment, and control. At one point, he staged his own fake death just to see who would attend his funeral and how they would react. When he saw that his wife did not appear sufficiently distraught, he reportedly beat her afterward. This part of the story is not funny. It's a reminder that Timothy Dexter was not a misunderstood hero or a lovable fool. He was volatile, egotistical, and often cruel. His success did not make him wise. It amplified who he already was. As he aged, Timothy became increasingly obsessed with legacy. He wanted to be remembered, not as lucky, not as foolish, but as brilliant. He believed history had underestimated him. He believed he had cracked some secret code of success. And maybe, in a strange way, he had. Timothy Dexter died in 1806, leaving behind a fortune, a mansion full of statues, a book no one could properly read, and a story so absurd that it sounds fictional. Was he a genius pretending to be a fool? Probably not. Was he a fool protected by extraordinary luck? Possibly, but the more unsettling possibility is this. Timothy Dexter succeeded because he was immune to doubt. He didn't overanalyze. He didn't fear embarrassment. He didn't wait for permission. He moved forward blindly while smarter men stood still. In a world ruled by caution, planning, and expertise, Timothy Dexter proved that sometimes the person least aware of the rules is the one most likely to break them and profit. History remembers inventors, generals, and philosophers. But somewhere between them all stands Timothy Dexter, the man who failed upward, the man who turned mockery into money, the man who reminds us that success does not always reward intelligence. Sometimes it rewards audacity, and sometimes it rewards sheer unstoppable chaos.